What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some of the 3 biggest mistakes that all wide receivers want to avoid. So we're going to be showing a negative example, so the mistake the wide receivers will make, and then the exact same route with the mistake improved by a different wide receiver, and how you guys can implement this into your game. So I hope this video helps you guys out. I hope it teaches you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you want to improve your press release game, check out that very first link in the description below for a 50-minute long video on 20 different press releases, when to use each press release, and then drills with sets and reps to work on each one. If you guys feel like that's a video that could help you out, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get started. So this first route here is going to be this slant route versus this catch technique inside shade DB about 2 to 3 yards off. Now this route gets completely locked up, but it's pretty easy fix. And like I said, then we'll show a positive example of this exact same coverage with a successful route. So when this DB is lined up inside shade, we know one thing. What's he trying to do? Trying to take away the inside. He has no help to the inside. He has no safety help. He's trying to funnel us and force us all the way to the outside. So if I have to run a route like a slant route, that's the one route that he doesn't want to give up. Now, if he's pressed up and he's right at my face, right on the line of scrimmage, I don't really have to worry about what I'm talking about here. I could just go a diamond release. So what a diamond release is, it's 3 hard steps on a 45-degree angle. Goal is to get the DB to open up to the fade, and then we could slip underneath and run the slant. So now what this wide receiver needs to do, though, when we have this cushion with the DB, which is aka space between us and the DB, is he needs to close this cushion. He needs to make it to where it's like he's right up in his face by attacking his leverage and actually trying to step on his toes. But what this wide receiver does when he makes this move to the inside, there is way too big of a gap. So when he takes off on his diamond release, you see those 3 steps that he takes right here, there is way too big of a gap, like I said. So even if we get this DB to open up his hips, even if we get him to flip to the fade, what can he do? All he has to do is open up his hips, and he has a better angle on this 45 to make a play. And that is everybody's biggest nightmare on this diamond release. What if I don't get this DB to open up his hips? And what if I just run right into him? And how we can avoid that is by closing the cushion. We want to try to stay hip to hip with this DB. So if I was coaching up this wide receiver after this rep, I would tell him, hey, when you choose to do your release, let's maybe quicken up the tempo so it doesn't feel rushed. Let's get into his cushion so when you break up to this diamond release, instead of being maybe a 2 yards away from him, we're about right next to him, and my right hip is right next to his right hip. And that is when you guys can get separation on this diamond release. So let's play this thing full speed, and then we'll show you guys the positive example of this exact same route and how you guys can implement this to your game. So again, fellas, just have to make sure that we are closing the cushion and hip to hip with this DB. So this is Chris Olave, so I'm going to play it at full speed in a second. But again, inside shade, about 2 to 3 yards off. And he does the exact same release, but this is how it should be done. So watch his feet off the line. He attacks the leverage, hip to hip, and you see the separation he is able to get. DB is not even in the screen. That is textbook, and that is what we want to do. Because think about like this too. If you're running a fade route and you have inside shade, what are you probably going to do? You're probably going to try to step on his toes, give him a fake inside, and then burst up to the outside. What does a diamond release do? A diamond release sells the fade for 3 steps to get that DB to flip his hips. But we have to threaten him with a fade, fellas. DB will not be threatened vertical if we have too much of a distance, too much of a gap between the two of us. You have to try to get into his toes, close that space, and then when you take off on that 45, we are hip to hip. I know you can't really see his hip right here, but we are hip to hip with this DB. Now, not only will that make it easier for us to get separation on the acceleration phase of the route, but it makes it a lot easier for me to throw by. I put my hand, as soon as I put the brakes on, my hand goes on the back of the elbow, back of the shoulder, maybe back of the hip if things are real tight. But when you can get him hip to hip and you could use that throw by, that can get me a ton of separation. So that's textbook right there. That is exactly how you would want to run that slant route when it is about a 2 to 3 yard off situation. So let's play this full speed. And now we're going to get to the next mistake that wide receivers love to make. All right, so now the next mistake here is a situation where you have to run like an outside route, like a fade route, like a comeback, like an out route, whatever it is, and you have inside shade press. So like we talked about in the last clip, it kind of builds off of the diamond release. When he's inside shade, what is he trying to protect? Trying to protect the inside. So the best way to get this DB to move, they call this his platform, right? The best way to get him to move off of his platform is by threatening him to where he's taught not to give up. He is taught not to give up the inside. Don't let him run a slant. Don't let him take an inside release and run a dig. You don't have any help over there, so let's force him to the sideline. So as a wide receiver, my thought process needs to be, okay, I have inside leverage. I'm going to attack his leverage. There's a great video, I believe Brandon Marshall's YouTube channel posted it about Elijah Moore. talking about his press releases. And he talks about his first question is when they ask him, what's your go-to release? He goes, what's the leverage of the DB? Because that dictates what you need to do. If he's inside leverage, let's attack his leverage and let's take what he gives me outside. So let's play this full speed. So this is the bad example. This wide receiver does not attack leverage, and you see how this DB is able to squeeze and give that quarterback pretty much no space to fade him open and no space for a good route. That is the common mistake. So when he comes off the line here, and again, like I said, we're going to show a positive example of a fade route here in a second. When he comes off the line, he slides to the outside. I'm cool with the slide release in this scenario. Don't think it takes too long. Don't think it does anything. But when you slide to the outside, you can't just step and give kind of just like two choppy steps. Like that's not going to threaten any DB. No DB is going to be threatened by the slant if you guys actually aren't selling it. You have to actually step into his frame, step into that cushion. You actually have to sell at the upper half. There's got to be some explosion to it, because if there's no explosion to it, why would this guy bite in the first place? He's going to stay disciplined and watch your hips. He could care less about how much feet movement you have and how much head movement you have. He is watching your hips. So if you just give like a shake with your upper body, that ain't going to do nothing. You have to give him some kind of move to threaten him inside and threaten that leverage. So let's play this again full speed, and then we will show a positive example of something you could probably do in this situation other than the slide release. So this next clip here we have, same thing, right up on the line, inside shade press. Now, I would say, honestly, this is probably a harder situation to get separation on, because this, well, actually, I digress that statement, because this DB is inside shade because the wide receiver has such a wide split. So he's probably anxious to jump the inside route. So it makes it a little bit easier, to be honest with you, to get separation. But the same principles apply in terms of what's going to work. Because if you're running a fade route and you're lined up at like the bottom of the numbers where this wide receiver is, and you just take off and don't threaten him inside at all, he is going to get hands and squeeze you all the way to that sideline. You have no space. But this wide receiver understands that principle. He's inside leverage. He attacks inside. And I want you to see where that foot placement is on his release. Look at where he's stepping. This DB starts to get into his like inch back technique. Where does this wide receiver step? He steps into his frame. He's actually threatening him. Hips and shoulders faking to the inside, stepping outside that DB's frame. That's what gets him to bite. That's what gets him to think inside route. You doing some kind of little like head and shoulder lean and doing some kind of like lateral step in this case is not going to do anything. You have to close the space with that DB. You have to threaten him to where he doesn't want you to go. Same principles apply if he's outside leverage, fellas. If he's outside leverage, and let's say your split's cut down to like the top of the numbers and he's expecting an outside route, and let's say you're running an outside route, you don't want to just take off and run to the inside. You want to attack him. Let's threaten him where he doesn't want me to go to throw that DB off the platform. That is the main key when you're facing inside leverage, fellas. Let's watch the thing again. Don't make that cardinal mistake of just running around the guy and not threatening the leverage. We have to threaten his leverage. All right, so now last example that you see from a lot of wide receivers is them not taking the correct angle when they're facing off-man coverage. So this is going to be like kind of a stop route, and then we're going to show a route from Justin Jefferson where he does the exact same type of thing, but instead of it being like a stop or a curl, he's running a comeback, but it's the same type of coverage, same type of move. So when this wide receiver he decides to go with this like vertical set. So a vertical set is essentially like a jab inside that you can give to get this DB to try to like sit on a post. So a vertical set is this right here. I know it's not like an over-exaggerated step, but normally you'd want to exaggerate it a little bit more. Now, I saw something where this clip was posted, and the guy said that, oh, he needs to make that jab move to the inside a little bit closer to the DB. Now, here's the problem with that. Quarterback is expecting you to break at a certain point. He's expecting you to break, like let's say the route's at 15 yards. He's expecting you to break at 15 back to 12 or 12 back to 10, whatever it is. So you can't just change up the depth of the route. You can't say, oh, he needs to make this move when he's closer to the DB, because then that's going to screw up the timing of the route. You're going to do the vertical set, and then you're going to, sooner or later, you're going to be at the break point, and it's going to be pointless. So him doing the vertical set is not a bad call right here. He just takes too wide of an angle and leaves a gap between the DB, very similar to that diamond release that we talked about. So you see when he decides to make this vertical set, he jabs, but when he goes, he takes a very wide angle. Big gap between the DB and this wide receiver. Now, the issue is he's never threatened by the vertical here. When you give a jab inside, that's how you would run a fade route against off coverage. You'd run up, you give a jab inside, and then you try to slip behind. But if you never get vertical and try to go almost hip to hip, this DB is never threatened by the fade. So he's always going to kind of be settled. Because even if you do run a fade, he still has the best angle to make a play. He's not threatened by the vertical because you took the wrong angle. So when it's time to actually drop it off, again, he's not running full speed. His hips and shoulders are not flipped to the fade because this wide receiver took the wrong angle after the vertical set or didn't sell the fade enough. And that's what allowed him to sit down on this thing and lock this route up. So we're going to look at a clip here from Justin Jefferson after we play this full speed of the correct angle that you would want to take when you use a vertical set move to threaten that DB with the fade. So this is like, I would say, a more traditional like zone coverage look where he's facing the quarterback. But I want you to see getting the DB to do this and bail out of it. That is the main key. Getting him to think fade, maybe open up his hips or maybe start to turn and run with you. How do we get him to do that? And that is based on the angle that you take after that vertical set move. So when you come off here, and he makes this move to the inside, Justin Jefferson. The last receiver, what he did was he made this move, this vertical set, but he went very wide. And when you go wide, this guy's not threatened. But when you go hip to hip and you take that angle and you're almost like right at that guy's blind spot, that's what can get him to sit fade. That's what can get him to be off balance, but that can get us that separation to where we can accelerate back to the ball when it's off coverage. Because when it's off coverage, the DB's goal is to keep everything in front of him. But if you can get creative and set him up with that fade, push vertical, try to make him open up, that is what can help me win this route consistently and be able to get me the most separation possible. So fellas, more often than not, route running is about angles. How are you attacking? How are you taking your angle? How are you taking your stem? That is what will get you open. And you want to avoid those 3 mistakes that we talked about today on this. Play at full speed one more time. Great job by Jefferson using that vertical set, attacking that vertical or attacking fade right away to get separation on that comeback route. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys as usual. And again, fellas, if you would like a full 50-minute long video on 20 different press releases, when to use them, and then drills to work on each one, check out that very first link in the description below. See you guys next time.